Mauro works specifically on language ideologies and policies of indigenous and endangered languages of East Africa, and has conducted extensive research in Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, and South Sudan, and the indigenous languages spoken there. He is the scientific director of the journal Caravan, which is the International Journal of Asian and African Studies at the University of Turin. And as although he mostly works in African linguistics, he also teaches first level Arabic classes. So I think that shows that he, given that his journal is both African and Asian studies, I think he fits right in with us at the center. His recent publications include a grammar of Gawada, which he will tell us a little bit more about in his talk today, and a book called a co-edited book with his colleague Marco Tamborelli, entitled Contested Languages: The Hidden Multilingualism of Europe. And I hope he will tell us a little bit more about that. Today, Mauro will be talking to us about space and language. And so I will, without further ado, thank you so much, Mauro, for being here with us. And he'll speak for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and conversation. So thanks again, Mauro.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Gracias a todos. Siento muchísimo que no puedo tener esta conferencia en español. Yo lo comprendo, pero no lo hablo si bien que puedo tener una conferencia, ¿no? Totalmente. And I hope that if I speak in English is correct. I want to say also that I thank you, everybody. I thank you, the Colegio and the Centro de Estudios de Asia y África, for welcoming me. And I want to say also that in any moment, if you want to interrupt and ask for something, we can simply stop, and without having a fixed presentation and then questions. We can mix it as we want. I was wondering what could be of interest, and I decided not to give today a general presentation of such a huge, large topic as languages of Africa, but something more specific on something which is connected to Africa, but also much more. We're talking simply about the space and how we encode space in human languages. Don't worry, there will be something about Africa. Actually, the main part will be about Africa, but we also have to discuss general, well, not a theory because it's a fact, but let's say something interesting for our cognitive systems and what we usually take for granted, and it's not so granted, and we see that there is a lot to discuss and to see about the variation in human languages and human thinking. I present presentation, but in any moment I hope that you are seeing it. Can you? Yeah.
Yes, yes, we can see it.
So the title you see is very general. Space in language and cognition. Of course, I am not a cognitivist. I am simply a humble linguist. But I hope that we are going to say something of general interest. In the backdrop, there is a compass. Normally, I use a physical compass when I give these classes in Italy. And to be face-to-face is also interesting, but also maybe if you are online, you can do a few things for yourself. It's equally very, very, very good. What are we going to do? What are we going to discuss? Okay, I will talk a little bit about my own problems when I investigated the expression of space. Let's be clear. What do I mean with expression of space? I mean simply something like I am on your right, you are in front of me, you are behind me, these kind of things. And I was investigating this language a few years ago for a small and undescribed language of South Ethiopia. We're going to see a map in a moment. And believe me, I had many, many problems, many horrible problems. So we're going to see, I just want to mention my problems and the fact that I didn't understand anything about it for a very long time. In order to understand what happens in this language and in many other languages of the world, we have to get a wider picture and to bring in very different things. For example, also a few space systems used by Aboriginals in Australia, for example, that have been studied a lot. Then we can come back to the expression of space in Gawada, and now we can try to understand it at the light of this light of this wider picture. And in the very end, we can finish with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. You think that maybe they have nothing to see with this. Actually, no, they don't. But we are going to discuss a few implications on the basis of a screenshot from a very famous movie. The general problem is how are relations in space? Relations means exactly as I said, how do you say in front, behind, right, left, these kind of things, how they are expressed in human languages. How much different is their expression? This is quite new. I mean, not extremely new, but let's say that it's something that has been investigated and discovered in the last, let's say, 10, 15, maybe 20 years at most. We will see that they are so different, the different ways in which space is expressed in human languages, that possibly they have cognitive implications and also implications in other realms. So, for example, in body language, for example, how do we sign? What do we do when we say to somebody, go to the left, go to the right? This is not a problem, but think, everybody now, what do? You can do it yourself in front of your screen. What do you do with your hand or with your, with your arm when you have to say something, it's behind me? I am doing it right now, you cannot see, and in my language, in my culture, and also in your language and culture, I think that you probably point, maybe you turn your head a little bit, not 180 degrees, but you turn your head a little bit, and then with your thumb, or maybe with the whole hand, you point to the back, let's say, to one side of your head. Are you following me? Is this what you are doing? This is not what everybody does in the world. We don't have time, but there will be very interesting, and maybe we are going to discuss this next week, implications about relativity and about the huge problem if language in some way interacts with thought, and this is a very hard proposition, if language has a bearing on how we think. because if language has a bearing on what we think, it means that we think in different ways. That is, human beings do not think in the same way. And this, believe me, I think it's a very huge implications all levels of discussion. Related to this is the problem of, can everything be translated? That is, can everything that is said, anything that is said in any of the 6,000 or maybe 7,000 languages of the world, of this planet, can easily be translated, or let's take off easily, can be translated into any other language? Usually we think that it's possible because we are all human beings, but certainly what we are going to see in a moment makes us think that maybe something is simply not translatable. This is a very important conclusion, or it's not a conclusion, but it's a suggestion. And of course, you have already understood what I'm going to say. The main problem is, are right, left, front, back, these kind of things, are these universal concepts or not? We could, I don't want to lose much time, but you can think that maybe there are related problems in time. There is nothing comparable for the expression of time, but we recently, not me, but it has recently been discovered that there are a few interesting problems. For example, is time universally conceived as a line in space? I hope that you can follow me. Line in space means that you close your eyes and somehow you think tomorrow, after tomorrow, and in 20 years, and you can mentally put the things in a line, and please tell me, where is the future and where is the past when you put them in a line? That is usually for me, and I guess for everybody, I know for everybody, future time is ahead. Do you agree with me? When you think of the future is ahead. When we think of the past, the time is back. But is this so for everybody in the world? And why is that so? If you think about it, there is no reason why the future is ahead. It could be up, it could be down, it could be back. But everybody, almost everybody, thinks that future is ahead, past is back, and somehow we are in the middle. It's certainly true that it's almost universal. If you want to read many fascinating things about this, there is an interesting book by Caleb Everett, that's the son of the more famous other Everett, but we're going to discuss this in a moment. Linguistic relativity. There are very interesting observations and data, especially from South America. South America is the area where there are more problems in this realm. For example, there is at least a language, a Tupi-Guarani language of Brazil, that in which people apparently do not and cannot and are not able to and have no necessity to put things in time in a linear ordering. And more important, and this I find very fascinating, they discovered a language that's quite a big language, Aymara, spoken in Bolivia and Peru, where future is back and past is ahead. And if you think about it, there is a reason for that. The reason is that we do not know the future, right? If we do not know the future is back because we do not see it. And the past is ahead because we know it, we have seen it. And just as our eyes are in front of our head, we can see the past, we cannot see the future. So there is a logical reason for why the speakers of Aymara put future in the back, because they, just as we, do not know the future. Why do we put the future ahead? Probably because this is the direction in which we move Usually we move ahead when we move, when we talk, we look in a certain direction. That's the direction of our eyes, of our mouth, of our legs, and our movement and the future. So our system is based upon the fact that we move in a certain direction, while the Aymara system is based upon the fact of what we know about knowledge. And in this case, knowledge and direction have nothing to do. It's just to let you imagine the kind of fascinating problems, maybe without any solution, that you can start to grasp and to understand are related to space and time. Let's talk about space, and let's say in 30 seconds that we are not going to discuss the vertical plan. Why we are not going to discuss the vertical plan? Well, because there is a very universal, they say, physicists say it's universal, it's not even a human thing, that is gravity. Gravitational force is apparently universal, and gravitational force is the reason why, oh, I forget that you don't see me, but in this very moment, I have taken something from my pocket and I let it fall. And what happens is that it falls down. I don't know in your experience, but things fall down, they never go up. And they never go up, of course, because there is something like called gravity. Think about Newton and all these kind of things. If up and down are universal, the gravity is a very strong reason why everybody, every culture, every society, every language has a word for up and down, and basically expresses up and down in the same way. So we are not going to discuss the vertical plan. There is not much to say about the vertical plan. There are different words, of course, and different metaphors. Yes, different metaphors. That is another thing that could be interesting to discuss if you work on for example, on literature. We want to discuss instead the horizontal plan, because different from the vertical plan, and thank to God, we have nothing on the horizontal plan that pulls us in a certain direction. We are more or less free to go where we want. That is, there is no universal law for going in a certain direction, and therefore there is no universal law to express the horizontal plan in a certain way. A few words about this language I was investigating. This is a map of a linguistic map, but you have the political borders of East Africa, of the Horn of Africa. More or less the area we are going, language we are going to discuss is in southwest Ethiopia. It's an area, it's one of the areas of Ethiopia, of Africa, in which there is most diversity, cultural, economical, ecological, and also linguistic. The language I was investigating, and about which I am hopefully going to publish a book that was supposed to come in these very weeks, is called Gawada. If I don't want to lose too much time, but we always use, in order to talk about languages, we also use a 3-letter tag. The letter tag for Gawada is not very fantasy. There is GWD. It's interesting, and it's also, if you want, ideologically intriguing that nowadays, maybe you don't know because you don't deal every day with languages, but nowadays there is a global list of languages and a global list of codes for languages with that is codified, but ISO. ISO is the International Standard Organization. So languages are coded exactly like types of plastic are coded, exactly like fuels are coded, or whatever. So somebody came up with the idea of coding languages. Think about it. I am impressed by this. I mean, I don't want to judge this. It's useful, but think about, we are coding languages, and maybe one day they will code cultures, societies. So think about the implications. Okay, this is the language. This is another type of map. This is my problem, okay? It was a few years ago. I was on the field in southwest Ethiopia, in Gawada land. I had learned in the previous weeks and months to say, I am a slow learner, to say something like I, you, he, the pronouns, and also something like me, him, no, the other sets of pronouns in this language. I had learned that in this language, I, the pronoun, is said ano, and I am this guy. And I have also learned that you singular, irrespective of gender, male or female or whatever, it's said ato. If you know a bit of Arabic, ano looks a little bit like Anna, sounds a little bit like Anna, that is I in Arabic. So it's connected genetically. So I knew how to say ano, me, I knew how to say you, and I knew also some basic things about word order, that is that the verb or the predicate is at the end of the sentence in this language. So something like I to the market go, always at the end, like in Japanese and many other languages. And I had also learned, and this is the problem, and this is the reason of my problem. A few days earlier, I had learned to say right and left. This was the source of all the troubles. Because one day I was sitting with my friend and main consultant about the language, and I tried to say, and was very proud of this, I tried to say something like, I am on your right. Very stupid thing. And I said, miskite is in this language means right. And I said, don't worry now about a lot of grammar. Hola means you when it's not subject, but this is not important. And I said something like ano, hola, miskitate. Literally, I to you on the right. That is, I am on your right. And my friend, my consultant, looked at me, very puzzled. And clearly he did not understand. And I repeated, and I was a bit worried by now. And I repeated, and in the end, he laughed and said, oh no, but this has no meaning at all. I mean, you cannot say something like this, because if you say something like this, it could mean that, that you are sitting on top of my arm. And it's not what we are doing, and not what I wanted to say. This is not what I wanted to say. So he made a big laugh, and he told me the correct way, and he told me that the sentence was ano, hola, me to you, gora. Okay, was very happy about it. I understood that in this language, when you say something about right and left are only used for body parts. That is, the word for right only means the right hand or arm, or you can also use it with the word for leg or foot, but you cannot say that, I don't know, the pen is on my right, or you are on my right in the direction of my right. It's another thing. Okay, I learned the new word Cora. I was very happy. And then I changed and I asked him to say the contrary, that is to say, you are on my left, because this is how we were sitting. And I didn't know the word because I had understood by now that I couldn't use pihatte. Pihatte means left, because you don't use right and left for space. And I asked them, okay, tell me. And to my amazement, to my discomfort, really it was a big psychological blow to me. Believe me, he told me, Ato yela, that is you to me, gora. But wait a moment. But gora is exactly what he was saying a moment ago about right. So I didn't understand anything. I said, but how is it possible that gora means at the same time right and left? I was really shocked. I did not understand it, the system. I left it. I tried the different system in different times during my stay that year in Ethiopia, and I never understood it. I never understood it because I have to cut it, but because sometime we changed position, and Gora was no longer Gora, and I was still on the right, and it was another word. In the end, I did not understand the space system of this language. I knew a lot of things about the verbal system and very complicated things, but I could not say simply go to the right, go to the left, go back, go in front. I could not say it. That is, I was working on the impression of my language, of my culture, that is that somehow I was the pivot of everything. That is, that's what we do normally. That is, we think that we are this guy in this picture, seen from above, and that we have a set of two mental, imaginary lines that go endlessly. To the right, to the left, to the front and back. And this was what for all my life I thought, and probably what you also think. Do you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Do you hear me?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was just not sure. So this is my idea. This was my idea. This is probably your idea. And I had to accept one day that this is simply not true. That is not true for everybody in the world, not true for everybody in this planet. That's the only planet we have, by the way. If this is not true, what is true? I was under the impression, of course, of what is a very long tradition in philosophy, in psychology, in our culture, something that go back at least to Protagoras in the 5th century before current era, who said the man is the measure of all things. And then we have a lot of these discussions in Aristotle. We have a lot of these discussions in Leibniz. Probably we have the best definition of this problem in Kant in the 18th century, when he discusses the source of knowledge, and he explicitly says that the body is the source of intuitions about space. It's also what developmental psychology, Piaget, and a lot of other guys say, that is the human being, when we grow, when we learn the world about us, we think about, we put ourselves in the middle, and we discover more or less that there is something in front, back, right, left, and bias, and this is our world. At the same time, 20 years ago, Stephen Levinson, who works in Nijmegen in the Netherlands, came up with a very important book that is, again, I did not discover anything. I simply worked on this Gawada language, but now we are going to discuss what we owe to Levinson, and basically we apply Levinson's picture to Africa. David Levinson came out with a book in Cambridge University Press, Spacing Language at Cognition, by the way, is the same title of my talk today. And after a long field work of him and his associates, he discovered that, he simply put down what actually everybody knows, if we think about it, that when we want to say something about the position of things, we have basically three different ways. One is to say, I don't know if you can see it because it's not too big. This is a screenshot from his book. We can say something, we are outside, of course, and we want to say that this man here, and there is the house. We can say it in three different ways. We know very well the first two ways. The first possibility that's correct in English and also in Spanish and many other languages is he is in front of the house. That's correct, right? He's in front of the house means that I look at the scene, I see the man, I see the house, I take as the pivot the house, and then I imagine that the house has a front and a back. In general, the front of a house is where you enter and come out. So the front of the house is here, and the guy, F, the figure, is in front of the house. Okay, that's it, finished. We can also say that the guy, he is to the left of the house. In this case, I use my position. I am the guy here with the eye. I am looking, and I look at the scene, and I say that the guy is to the left of the house. That's correct. That's what I was going to ask my consultant in Awada many years earlier, sometime earlier. But there is a third possibility. Look now. We could say, why not, that he is north of the house. Okay, I cannot say that it's really north because it depends on where I am now. Oh, by the way, I don't have my compass here. I have it on my cell phone. I should check where is the south right now. You can also do it in your at your house, and you will know. But let's imagine that the picture is correct. That is south is, we say, to the right, north is here, and we can imagine somebody saying he is north of the house. This is what Levinson calls an absolute frame of reference. That is, he discovered that there are three frames of reference. We can call them F or R, or three coordinate systems that are the intrinsic, that is, it depends on the object. Absolute, it depends on the north and south and east and west, of course. And relative. Relative is our principal, our main frame of reference. That is, it depends on the position of the speaker, of the viewer. Right, left, front, back. Of course, well, there are lots of problems with our frames of reference. For example, if you look at this picture and you want to describe the position of the ball and of the car, you can say the ball is in front of the car, and this is an intrinsic frame of reference, or you can say the ball is to the left of the car. That is, it depends upon you. If I assume that I am here, the eye, and I look at the scene, and the ball is to the left and the car is to the right. Everybody knows, and maybe you remember that there are a lot of problems when we discuss things in everyday life, and also a lot of problems when we learn our system. We know by now that children do not learn to use our system well until 5, 6 years old. What are the problems? Well, typical problems. I ask you, where is the car turning? In which direction is the car turning? And again, you can say the car is turning right, and you use an intrinsic, you imagine that the car has a front, or you can say the car is turning left. That is, you are using a relative frame of reference. And then you have all the problems when you sit or you stand in front of somebody that, as you know, my left is your right is my left, and all kind of problems. And it's a very complicated system in which different cultures, also in Africa, use different systems, because not everybody does the translation. Translation is the fact that I change my left and right, I translate it according to the direction of to the position of the addressee, to the people I'm talking to. So there are lots of problems, lot of possibilities of ambiguities. But certainly, believe me, my dear friends, I would never think in my life of saying something like the car is turning east. Would you say something like that? Not at all, because first, you don't know where east is. And your addressee, that is the guy you are talking to, they don't know either. And we cannot pretend everybody to have a compass and go around with a compass. And we do not have, and that's interesting, an internal compass. Always in Nijmegen, and maybe that's useful for you when you do some anthropological field work, some of you, they developed these funny toys, actually, that are kind of plastic figurines of animals, of persons, and blah, blah. And they used it in order to discover these things. And I used it too in my field work. I don't like these figurines very much because, as you can immediately see, they are not very much, let's say, culture neutral or culture friendly. For example, they use the pigs. You don't go around the world showing figures of pigs, because pigs are not known everybody in the world, and they are not loved and liked everybody in the world. But okay, let's forget about this. So I asked, and we can also ask ourselves. We have A and B. We have yes, two pigs. We have the guy, and I can say, and I can ask you, is the guy to the left or in front of the pigs? And of course, there is no answer. The answer is, it depends on the frame of reference you use, intrinsic or relative. I can ask, is pig A, number one, pig A, in front of the tree or in front of pig B? Actually, it's in front of two different things that are in two different directions. This is quite paradoxical, but we can use the system in this way. So, okay, let's go back to what is really interesting for Gawad and for our discussion. The most interesting, because for us is the newest and the strangest and most exotical frame of reference, is the absolute frame of reference. It was discovered in northern Queensland, that is in the north of Australia, with not everybody, with a few Aboriginal groups of languages that are disappearing, by the way. All the speakers now are old. They went around asking these things, and they discovered, and they were very puzzled at the beginning, that these people used what they called an absolute frame of reference using north, south, east, west. Imagine our researchers, what they did. Well, first thing, they did not believe it. I wouldn't believe it either. And they describe, and it's very funny because they describe all kinds of experiments they did with the poor Aboriginal people. They had somebody telling them, okay, this battle is to the north of you. And they wrote it down and they took pictures, and they blindfolded him and they turned him around, and then they let him see another thing, and he said, okay, now the table is north of me. And it was correct. They checked with compass. And the next step, they blindfolded the guys and they took them around on a car to a different location. And they asked, and again, they were correct. And they even brought them inside. Indoors, it can be more difficult because indoors you don't have many clues. And they asked, okay, now tell me, where is the chair? And the guy said, yeah, it's easy. It's south. And it was correct. Actually, it's not geographically correct according to the magnetic pole. They calculated that the north of these people is something like 12 degrees to the east, but let's skip these small things. The point is that in this culture and in a few other cultures of the world, somehow they have an internal compass and they know where north is. And if you know where the north is, you know where the south is, and you know where the east and west are. This is quite incredible. We don't know exactly how and how they do it, of course, because we cannot open the brain and we don't see anything if they open the brain. But this is, in my opinion, one of the most shocking things that they discovered in recent years about human cognition. The system found in Australia, in a few groups of Australian Aboriginals, is the most interesting because it's based upon the cardinal points. But there are a few other absolute frames of reference. For example, in Polynesia, they found in a few islands of Polynesia, they found a system based upon the direction of the wind, the main winds, because winds tend to blow everywhere in a certain direction. Or in Papua New Guinea, there is an opposition between mountain and the sea. And so they say something like, the chair is mountain bound to me, or the table is sea bound, to the direction of the sea to you, and something like that. Or based upon the relief, that is the mountains and the plain, or the mountains and the desert. This has been found here in Mexico and in Guatemala, in the South Mexico, in Chiapas. And I am proud to say that I documented the same system in East Africa, and we are going to discuss it very briefly in a moment. Possibly there are other systems. All of these are absolute systems. Maybe we can stop a moment, but the last thing I want to say before stopping is, no, it's not last thing. Sorry. Okay, this is a picture, sorry, it's a very bad picture, but it's a picture taken by me, so I'm not a good photographer, of Gawada country. I hope you can, there is not much depth in this picture, but I hope you can see that there are hills. There are a series of hills, and at the bottom of the hills there are seasonal streams, and everything involves going up and down. If you are a woman, you have a very tough life because you go up and down to fetch water in all day. And if you are a man, you go down from your village or your household, and you go down and then you go up and tend your field, which probably is on the opposite hill. And then you come back and blah, 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 blah. So everything actually is going up and down. There is one thing that you cannot do very easily in this world. You cannot play soccer very easily because you never find something that is big enough and it is flat. This area, you see the circle to the south, is, let's say, to the foothills, to the south and to the foothills of the big Ethiopian mountains that go down in Kenya and Tanzania. They reach 3,000, 4,000 meters high. Here it's not very high in Gawada country. Let's say that everything is 1,500 meters, 1,800 meters. It's not very high. It's still mountain, but in any case, what it is interesting is that it is hilly countryside. And at the same time, to the south of the Gawada, there is a very desert area, very flat and very barren area. So you can imagine that this is, let's say, it's a possibility. It gives you a possibility to develop an absolute frame of reference. And this is what I discovered, and this is the solution to the problem of the beginning. That is why the guy was tricking me about right, left. He was not tricking me at all. That is, if I take this map, which is centered where the main road, the only paved road, passes, and Gawada is more or less to the north of the road. Let's say that this is the imaginary center of the country of where the Gawada people live. This is the coordinates. That is, you have the direction of the mountains, the direction of the desert, and you do not have two different things. You have a direction that is orthogonal to both the mountains and the desert. And this, by the way, is the gore that the guy used at the beginning of my presentation. So you have three different positions that we're going to see in the next slide. Okay, this is another representation of this. By the way, this is taken from an article by Penelope Brown, an American linguist, who described in 2006 the space system of a Maya language spoken in Chiapas. So this is a picture coming from Mexico. And again, we have the same system that he calls uphill, downhill, the, let's say, desert in Gawada terms, and horizontal plane. Horizontal plane is what is tangential or orthogonal to both the hills and down hills, the plain or the desert. I want to say, when I discuss this with my students, I always have somebody asking me, yeah, but this is not so strange, telling me this is not so strange. We do it too. When we go hiking in the mountain, for example, we say something like you are, I don't know how you say in Spanish, but in English you say uphill, downhill. In French you say amont, a val. In Italian, a monte, a valle, that is to the mountain, to the valley, because you are climbing, and the position of the speakers is not horizontal but vertical, and this is correct. Another possibility, think about, I don't do it because I do not sail, but think if you are at sea and you are a sailor, and there are two directions, in general leeward and another one I don't remember in English, but again, every people that has seafaring have these two different words. This is not what using an absolute frame of reference means. Believe me, this is not. We're talking a different thing. You are now sitting, I guess, with a computer in front of you, and imagine that you want to describe the things on your desk. Now I am sitting at Emily's desk, and Emily's left a flask. You don't see it. The flask is to my right, and my bag is on my left. And I have another screen, Emily's computer screen, in front of me, and behind me there is a shelf with books. What I mean is that if you use an absolute frame of reference seriously, you use it for what I call local space, not in order to talk about going up or going down, but what is really near you. You follow me. This is very important. We are not talking about discussing where the United States are in comparison to Mexico, because of course, in that case, we use north. We are talking about everyday conversation and everyday positions and directions when moving and when talking. For example, again, from Tzeltal, a language, my language, we have somebody answering, and the same would happen in Gawada, somebody saying that the bottle is not to the right, to the right of the chair, but the consultant say the bottle is uphill of the chair. But of course, it's not uphill, there is no hill. They are in a room, it's completely flat. The same happens with north-south among the Aborigines of Australia, and the same happens with uphill, downhill in my language in Southwest Ethiopia. Do you want to ask questions, or can I finish? Let me the same as you like. Any questions? Anything that I forgot? I forgot many things, but I'm cutting it short somehow. This is my representation of these three words actually. Kut, which means up hills, kor, which means 90 degrees orthogonally to the to mountains, and down hills, kal. There are hyphens after the root kut, kor, kal, because they do never appear like that. They always have some marking, some grammatical marking, but we cannot now describe the whole grammar of the language. We have a few examples in the next slides. I realize that I am talking too much, so I cut it short. Okay. There are other triplets. We are not going to discuss them. There are other three different words when you don't want to point to points, imaginary points, but you want to describe areas. And there are also three different verbs to say go up hills, go down hills, and go, I don't know how to say it in English, to go orthogonally, but it sounds fun in English. Let's see a couple of examples. The guy is standing in front, again, I'm using the intrinsic, a dog. Okay, the dog is in front of the man. Very far away, there are the mountains. They are not really there. They are maybe 100 kilometers away. They are more or less to the northeast of the country, but this is just to show you how the system works. Okay, if you are a Gawada, you don't say the dog is in front of the man, and you don't say the man is in front of the dog, blah, blah, blah. You say something like, the dog literally is up hills in respect to the man, because he's in the direction of the hills, of the mountains, in respect to the man. Haro, the dog, gauhido, to the man, guta. You say guta. I did not explain what this a is, but maybe we don't have time to do this. This is the slide about a, which means out, and u, which means in, towards me, and out means out of me. There is a very complicated grammar of the things, because they can have gute, guta, gutu with slightly different meanings. You can say very much close to the mountains, very much close to the desert, the direction of the desert. If I geminate, reduplicate the last consonant, gor instead of gor, and so on and so forth, we cannot discuss the grammar. Just a couple of examples. If I want to say go there, I cannot say go there in this language. I have to say go. Then you choose. You can go up hills, you go down hills, you go orthogonally or 90 degrees. You can say guta asha, literally up hills, go. You can say gala asha. You can say Gora Asha if you want somebody to go in the direction that is not neither mountain nor desert. You have to be very specific about this, which also means that they do not have this and that. You only have one, and you say the man up hills, that is again not up hills but in the direction of the hills, the man in the direction of the desert, blah blah blah. So it becomes a completely different system. And now, just for a moment, imagine a system that uses the north cardinal points and that says the man to the north, the man to the south, and you have to know how is it. Okay, let's skip this. This was about A and U. There is an interesting problem. I guess that in English, when you describe the two guys, you can say that you is the guy with the red shirt, you are in front of me. You are in front of me, right? Yes, this is correct. But, okay. But now look at this picture. And you are the guy with the black cap. Again, I can say you are in front of me. But in this case, I am not facing you, I am behind you. But I guess that in English, as in Italian, Spanish, and French, and many other languages, I can guess work like that. You can say the same thing. In Gawada, you distinguish the two things because in one case you use A, and in one case you use U. Gor, U, if we face each other, they are close to each other, and A, if we do not face each other. Last example is, imagine that I want to describe the position of the snake and the position of the house. It's not a Gawada house, of course. It's a Lego house. You can say Tawo Minne de Goru, that is, in English, I would say the snake is in front of the house, but in Gawada, I say the snake is on the horizontal plane, orthogonally to the mountains, in respect to the house. And if the snake moves, I change, and instead of saying it, I don't change the cardinal system. I always say Gor, but instead of saying Goru, that is close in front of the house, I say Gora, that is behind the house. Okay, this is more or less the end. Let's just discuss a few fascinating problems. Can all frames of reference be translated? When I say that not everything can be translated, my fellow linguists shiver. They do not agree with me. They do not agree with Levinson. But actually, there is no logical and automatic way in which you derive something like the knife is to the right of the fork. You cannot derive the knife is to the south of the fork. And vice versa. It's not possible. This is what in linguistics we call, in typology, we call a robust structural diversity. And then there is the very fascinating problem that we are not cognitivists, the cognitive implications. Remember what I said about talking about what is back. We say, we point. I think that now you see me. This is what I do usually, that I want to say that something, the books are behind me. I do like this with my hand, right? And maybe I turn a little bit, not so much because my back hurts a bit today. And I think that you do the same thing more or less. Well, people who have the north-south system, remember, to have a north-south, let's say, to have an absolute frame of reference means that you are not centered upon yourself. Yourself becomes immaterial. Your body is not the pivot, the center of everything. Okay, if you ask the Aboriginal system to talk about something that is behind them, they don't say behind, they say imagine south. but they say something like, look at me, and they point to their belly. That is, they imagine that the body is transparent and that the addressee can look behind the belly, the body of the speaker. This is something that I would never do. I would never point to my stomach or to my lungs or to my body to say that something is behind me. Nobody does that. They do. And let's just finish, because I promised to talk about Humphrey Bogart. That is, the last discussion is, if our system, relative frame of reference, is so complicated and children have so much trouble learning it, how is it that 99 probably, or let's say 95 percent of the language of the world, that is the cultures of the world, use our system? And how is it that we had to wait for Levinson to go to Australia to discover a system like North-South, and North-South are universal? And how is it that this universal system is not widespread? We do not know. We do not know. We do not know. There are a few suggestions, but they're just suggestions. Fascinating ideas, maybe fantasies. We can imagine that when we were hunter-gatherers, many thousand years ago, probably people had a better knowledge of the landscape, and somehow you had to know where the north, the south, east, and west are. And that probably we lost this knowledge. We lost it more or less completely nowadays. They also tried to discover if people somehow can guess without a compass, without a map, if they can guess the cardinal points, and they do not know. They tried it in England, and in the Netherlands, and the poor guys got lost. And there are many interesting and funny things. You often hear that there is a joke that men know the directions better than women, but that in the end men get lost and women do not get lost, because men know directions but do not ask for direction, while women ask for directions and they do not get lost. But this is just a joke. Why is it that our system is so common? There is a final suggestion. It's just a suggestion. It has to do maybe with the construction of the imagination, the imaginary world. Maybe you remember this shot? It's the final scene in Casablanca, a movie from 1942, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. Okay, Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman. They are about to leave forever and blah blah. But I don't know if you know that in the movie you never see Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman completely. That is, from head to toes. They are always cut. You always see them the head only, or the upper part of the body. Do you know why? Because Ingrid Bergman was much taller than Humphrey Bogart. Was very tall for her age, for a woman, and for the period. And Humphrey Bogart was not tall at all, and it was not good to show in a movie that the woman was taller than the man. So they always put Humphrey Bogart on a stool in order in order for him to be taller than the poor Ingrid Bergman. So imagine that you have seen the movie, that you want to describe the scene to somebody who has not seen the movie. And you can describe it as, well, I would say Humphrey Bogart is to the left of Ingrid Bergman, right? Ingrid Bergman is to the right of Humphrey Bogart. That's the end of it. The interesting thing is that this is correct. This is always correct. take your laptop for a moment, if it is a laptop, and just put it up and look at it from below. And again, Humphrey Bogart is to the left. If you change the direction, if you move yourself and the laptop, again, Humphrey Bogart is always to the right of, sorry, to the left of Ingrid Bergman. It is to the right of Ingrid Bergman, is to the right of Ingrid Bergman everywhere, forever. It has been to the right of Ingrid Bergman since the movie was shot in Hollywood in 41, and I don't know why they shot it like that, probably for the light. It will be like that forever. It has nothing to do with your, my, everybody position. If you see the movie in South Africa or in Russia or here in Mexico, Humphrey Bogart is always to the left of Ingrid Bergman. You see, okay. Well, this is interesting because if you have an absolute frame of reference, you can do that. If you have an absolute frame of reference, you somehow look at the world not in the screen, but out of the screen. And imagine that there are mountains behind your house, behind your screen, and you would say something like, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman are orthogonally to the mountains, and that's good. Or maybe Humphrey Bogart is in the direction of the sea in comparison to Ingrid Bergman, and this is good, but you don't explain, it changes with your position. There is a joke in the book by Levinson. If you ask an Australian Aboriginal to describe the movie he saw last night on the television, you do not understand nothing of the movie, but you understand everything about the house of your informant, because you know where things are and the direction of the house. So maybe it's an interesting suggestion. Maybe the point is that that the relative frame of reference gives us the possibility of invent a world. You invent a world when we have a story, a fairy tale. Okay, we get fairy tales in languages of Aboriginals. I got fairy tales in Gawada, and of course there is uphill, downhill, blah, 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 blah. I don't know if these are more or less conventionalized, that there is a convention, cultural convention, but certainly if you are a Gawada or if you are an Australian Aboriginal, Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman somehow change their position according to the position of the screen. And this, in my opinion, is a very radical problem. And we don't know if this is the reason why we are relative frame of reference speakers, and almost everybody is a relative frame of reference speaker. And this is the end of my story for today, and I'm sorry that it took me so long because I talk too much. And just tell me what you want to tell me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mauro. And I wouldn't say you spoke too long. That was quite interesting. So we're happy to listen to you talk. Does anyone have a question for Mauro? Whether it be from Facebook, or maybe Janet or Satomi, you can help me if there are questions in the Facebook chat. I certainly have a question,
okay.
But if someone else has one before, that's I can let them have the first go at it.
I also have a question, but I don't have
Yeah.
first.
Okay.
Maybe I put up the presentation again. Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman are much better than me.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Better than me. So
Bergman
let's
being...
let's
Being
look
taller.
at the guys. Yeah.
I didn't know that about her being taller than
Oh
Bogart.
yes, she was very tall.
Huh.
She was a typical Swedish woman, 1 meter 90 or something like that. And Humphrey Bogart was quite short. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and ask your question first?
Well, I have a few questions that I would like to ask, but I won't ask them all at once. The first question I have is about the difference between absolute and relative frames of reference. And I'm wondering if it's possibly to do with the relative geographical spread of the languages, right? So it seems like Gawada is spoken in a sort of a relatively confined area, whereas a language like French or Arabic or English is spoken in a bunch of different geographies. So there come to be all these sort of relative frames of reference. I mean, is that a possibility, or you said a little bit about where those
yes,
absolute versus relative frames of reference appear. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. It's a possibility. Let's say that it's that to be in a geographical environment that helps this absolute frame of reference is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition, because I would expect a language of the Himalayas, or a language of the Rocky Mountains, or language of the Alps. By the way, I am from the Alps, and we have much higher mountains than these guys in Ethiopia, by the way. But in Europe, in the Himalayas or wherever, they never used the system. They never developed the system apart from these uphills, downhills things that they are conventionalized and routinized. So apparently, yes, you must live in the right ecological and geographic, orographic in geographical terms, orographic condition in order to develop this, but it's not enough, because again, most languages of the world, they use the relative and do not use the absolute. And okay, let's say that you have to live in a mountain area and you have to do up and down your hill every day and many times a day. But what about the fascinating system of these Gamaldir, I think they are called, the Aboriginal Australian system? They use north, south, east, ovest. I mean, they use north, south, and again orthogonal to north and south. This does not depend on the fact that they live in Queensland. So my suggestion, but I believe me, it's just a suggestion, is that it depends on the fact that they live out of hunting and gathering, like all the humanity, all our ancestors, of everybody did until a few thousand years ago. Because let's remember that 90% and more of human history was as hunter-gatherers, and agriculture is born yesterday. Did they know the system better? Maybe. I am fascinated by this, but at the same time, I am also a bit scared by the implications of this, because in the end of the story is that we are wholly humans, but somehow there is something very deep that is different in our brain. I mean, this is something that touches our life every day. I don't want to say that somebody is not human, is less human, but it means that there is something very deep in the brain that works differently. Pace, Kant, Aristotle, and all our tradition. I find this a bit really mind-boggling. Yeah, so Certainly, in order to have a system based on the sea, you must live in an island in the Polynesia. There is another system that I didn't mention that is upstream and downstream of a river that is used in Siberia, among a few peoples of Siberia, where the rivers always flow to the north and they get frozen in winter, of course. But again, we have quite big rivers and we don't use it. So we don't know. Also, another thing, sorry, I could not discuss is the intrinsic frame of reference, because intrinsic is interesting, and everybody uses it. We use it in English, but almost nobody except a few Mayan peoples in Central America use it exclusively, because it means that all the things need to have a front and a back. Now, we know what the front of a house is. Even if our house is a circular, round hut, we can say that the front is where we enter, and that's fine. Yes, but how can you say that a stone has a front? What is the front of a stone? What is the front of a tree? Okay, the front of a tree, you could say culturally, you could say that it's the area which takes, I don't know, less humidity. But again, yes, it's a matter of culture. What is the front of a car? The cars have a front because they move in a certain direction unless you use the reverse. And this is the front of the car. But yes, it's a matter of culture. But it's difficult to use an intrinsic frame of reference all the time. What we do is that we mix relative and intrinsic. Yeah, sorry. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so just as sort of a follow-up to that, I'm wondering about, you've just raised the distinction that certain conventions for describing space and language are cultural, and you've also raised the possibility that they might be cognitive. And so I'm wondering how those relate, right? It's not that someone who uses, say, an absolute system like you've described in Goada could never understand an intrinsic or a relative framework. Certainly they could, but they don't. Oh, yeah. And so what is the sort of historical, is there any common historical pattern that unites Siberia and Chiapas and Goada? It's like totally random, or I mean, where does the distinction come from, I guess, is
as far as you know, it's random, provided that maybe you have the right geographical location, and probably, but now it's something that I'm thinking right now, maybe you have a certain but it's not true. I was thinking a certain dimension of the community, but it's not really true, because the Aboriginals are a few hundred speakers, but the Gawada are a few 100,000, so they are not so small. What was about to say? No, we don't, as far as I know, we don't have a historical, certainly they can know a different system. What I am fascinated, and I did not investigate, I could not investigate, and I would like to investigate it, is, okay, imagine that you take an Australian Aboriginal from North Queensland, you buy him or her a plane ticket and you take him here. Does he know where the north, south, east, west is? Probably yes. If he knows this distinction and he has it in his or her brain, we don't know how, we don't know the clues. Of course, this knowledge is changes from individual to individual. There are individuals that know directions better than others, even among them, just as in our culture, there are individuals who orient themselves better than others. But they know. But now I was thinking, imagine that I take my main consultant and I buy him, okay, even without a plane ticket, I couldn't afford it. I could buy them a bus ticket to go to Addis Ababa, which is 1 day bus ride, 1 full day bus ride. And we stop in Addis Ababa, and where is the mountain, where is the desert? And how can they say uphill, downhill? I don't know. Probably at this point, it becomes a matter of a convention between the community, that is the small group of speakers that are in that location. Exactly like when I heard a story about crocodile and I don't know, no, there was the elephant. This is a common story in East Africa, the elephant and the frog, and how the frog kills the elephant, whatever. And I have sentences like the frog is not to the right of the elephant, but is uphills of the elephant. And of course, it's a story told me orally, but probably this is a convention. I mean, probably they say that, I don't know, when you say the story of the frog and the elephant, the frog is always in that direction. Just as you ask me to talk about Snow White and the dwarfs or something like that, probably I imagine the story in a certain way, and Walt Disney imagined it in a certain way, and that's the end of it. So you can make an imaginary world, and probably they can invent a system in which even in Mexico, thousands of kilometers from Ethiopia, there is the mountain and there is the desert. I don't know, really, I don't know. This is one of the things I would like to know, and I don't know. Oh, but of course, they didn't try it also with the Aboriginals. With Aboriginals, they tried, as I said, to to bring these poor guys a bit everywhere during the night and trying to trick them, and they always had the right answer, which is quite strange. Yeah. So no, I don't, to answer your question short, no, I don't have a historical explanation. It would be interesting
I have
to know.
more questions, but Emily, you should ask. Sorry, go ahead, Mauro.
No, it would be fascinating to imagine that, because we think that we are on top and our system is the most developed, blah, blah, blah. It would be interesting to know, but we do not know, if during the course of human history, somebody moved from a relative system like ours to an absolute system, like the Gawada, maybe 1,000 years ago. Probably the Gawada were not in that area, were not in Ethiopia, as far as we know. So maybe they changed, but I don't know. This in that part of Africa that I know is what we call an areal thing, that are a few languages, a few peoples, very different languages, very different peoples, but all of them, all these languages are spoken nearby, and they all tend to have the system. We do not have good data about other languages, but from what I know, they all have a system more or less based upon mountain and downhills. How far does it go and how it came about, I don't know. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying I have a couple more questions, but I think Emily should ask her, so I don't mind.
Yeah, thanks. Mauro, I had a question. I'm not exactly sure how to frame it, but in terms of in Gawada, is there, at the beginning of your talk, you talked about this idea of left, right, relationality of people in space. Do you have any kind of notions or examples about people talking about sort of corporality and relationality. I'll give you what I'm thinking of is in Wolof, spoken in Senegal, people will often say that another person, they'll refer to another person as sort of their left hand, or they'll refer to them as, this is, this person is my left side, to basically say, that person is important to them, or that they are linked somehow. And I wonder if that's a phenomenon that.
Yes. There are similar things also in Somalia and Ethiopia, and in many. As far as I know, no, I don't have any data on this. An example of this, I'm thinking. Well, of course, people tend to shake the right hand. Many people in Africa and elsewhere do not speak well and think well of the left. If you are a Muslim, you refuse to use the left for certain things, but they are not Muslim and they are not even Christian, or let's say that they say they are, they don't really care. And I'm thinking things that you do. Yes, you do many things in front of other blessing. No, not many metaphors. Yes, you're talking about metaphors. That is, you are my right hand because you are who helps me. Yeah, this is our metaphor basically. And let's imagine when we talk about God and His Son to the right of the Father, right? And no, I'm sorry, I don't have anything like that.
Or I'm kind of curious.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything about, let's say, the mountain being more important than the desert, because it is something like this.
Yeah, because I'm curious.
And I don't know that Levinson, who describes, and his associates, who describe this culture in Queensland, in Australia. Again, they do not have anything about North being more important than other things, like we do, by the way, because we have something, I guess, something that is, well, we learn at school is something recent, but being the North Pole means being the, what does it mean, Emily? Being the right direction or the correct direction, yes, something like that.
Well, I think it has certainly religious components to it, but in terms of, the North Pole is kind of this guiding.
Yes, exactly, guiding, yes.
Yeah.
I discovered, I never understood exactly why, but I don't understand why in the United States, you say to go south, it means to go bad, or to go right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, things went south. I never understood why. I should learn about it. It's interesting. We have something like that, by the way.
Well, I think that probably could also have connotations of, heaven and hell, having been sort of thinking of it being north and hell being south. And so if you're going towards the south,
maybe. Because north in our maps is up and south in our maps is down. And this, by the way, is something that started in Venice in the 16th century, because they were the first producers, mass producers of maps. But the very early maps were upside down, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious, to think about this system that the Gawada have that you were explaining, that instead of thinking about something being to the left or right and having a more sort of geographical reference, what that would, how maybe those sorts of corporal references or would look, what that would sound or look like in a language such as Gawada. But
yes, the other thing comes to mind is this is much widespread. The first thing I say that is you don't use the word for right, left for everything to the right and left. You use it only for your body parts. I did not investigate because it was too late. I did not investigate for how many body parts can you use right and left. Probably you use it for your eye, you use it for your leg and hand, this I know. I don't know if you use it for all the body parts. And then, well, it's quite common that you don't not use exactly the same word, right and left, for directions. By the way, think about your languages, think about English. Where does your right end? Where does your left end? That is, you can talk about your bag being on the right, okay? You can talk about the garden. I am in your office and I'm talking about, I think, the periferico. Is it the periferico that I see? Okay. And I can say that the anel periferico is to my right. And it's, yeah, it could go, I guess. I don't know what it is behind the anel periferico, but would you say that that the United States is to the right? Even if it is to the right, you wouldn't. You wouldn't say that. It would be ridiculous. It wouldn't make sense. That is, there is a certain area around your body where right, left, front, back stop. And this is especially common with back, because remember that the first meaning is back is a physical part of the body. And then you use it for the area immediately to the immediately beyond. And many languages also in Africa use it for that, for what is immediately behind your back. But not many languages use it for saying that your bookshelf is to my back, because actually there are a few meters. So this is a cultural thing or a matter of use. I don't really know. I mean, it's not really my field. Probably more a matter for psychologists or for, maybe for anthropologists. What I think is that anthropologists should work a lot about gestuality, gestures, and what people does when they give directions. Because we do a lot of funny things. When somebody asks you direction in the street, don't know if it happens to everybody. To me, it happens a lot. I don't know why. Maybe I look like a policeman, but and they always ask me directions. Also here, and I don't know anything. And you do all kind of strange things with your hand. Yeah, again, these are very much culture specific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much culture specific, probably. Again, I don't know. Let's say that it's an area that calls for the interaction of different specializations. That is anthropologists, linguists, maybe also sociologists, because maybe there would be a change in progress when, I don't know, people go to town and they learn a different system, and people who are bilingual and the children of the Aborigines who do not know the language well and they rather speak Australian English. What do they do? Do they mix the system? Do they have troubles? I don't know, and Levinson doesn't know. Yeah, that's it. I mean, there is a lot we don't know. Really.
Yeah, go ahead.
A very basic sort of technical question, which is, how do you, in Gawada, how do you differentiate the two orthogonals, right? So if you're trying to tell someone to go that orthogonal as opposed to that one, how do they distinguish?
This, yes, I had to cut it short. This is basically with the use of this affix or you affix. One
Okay.
means in our direction, this means in the other direction.
Mhm.
And if we are side by side, the direction close to us and the direction far from us, opposite to us. This is basically what you do.
Mhm.
This is basically what you do, yes.
Mhm. So but that's not a. So I'm use Arabic a lot, and I'm thinking about the system of declension and case endings, right? And those have purely sort of grammatical functions, but it seems like in this case that distinction is not grammatical, it's something else. But since I'm not a linguist and I'm quite ignorant, I don't know what that category of using a suffix to make that distinction is. What is that? How would you describe that?
And this is a big problem. I had a lot of troubles. In the end, I described, I call a in, I gloss it, I tag it in my glosses, in the grammatical glosses, we give an abbreviation. So I like this because it's quite short in English. In means towards. And u, Gawada u is towards, and a is far, that is out of. If you want to be more technical, you could say that one is centripetal and the other is centrifugal. But it's a bit, I don't know, it's not an easy word. What is interesting, at least in my analysis, but there are many languages that do something like that, that you use a lot of these different, of course. In what is a and do in other languages completely different. All I know more about these Afroasiatic languages of Asia and Africa, but it happens a bit everywhere. You have a couple of words or affixes or whatever, okay, it's about direction, but it's also about mental direction. Mental direction means to do something for me and to do something against me. So in this language, in Gawada, there is no easy way. There are not two different prepositions like in English or French or Italian or Spanish to say, I took it from him and I took it for him. It's completely different, of course. It's almost the contrary. You do it adding a or u to a preposition which is ambivalent, which means simply movement. If you take n, which is this preposition, and you add na, n plus a, it means from, because it's out. If you say n plus u, nu, it's for, on behalf of, that is to and for. You make two different things. And they have been much studied in Berber, in Arabic, in Somali, but you don't do that in English, but actually we do something like that in a different way. We use pronouns in French, Italian, I don't know in Spanish, no, probably in French, no. In French, Italian, German, you have something like, which is very fun in English, not I ate a pizza, but I ate myself a pizza. You can do this in French, Italian, Spanish, even in Czech, Polish, etc. And what is the difference? And it's difficult to explain, but if I say I ate me a pizza, means I did it for me. This is quite ridiculous because, of course, you eat something for yourself. But there is affectedness. You are affected by it. Let's say that the action is not neutral. You liked it, and you use the pronoun. If you know French, they do the same thing. But okay, in Europe, we use pronouns to do this. you don't say, I broke my leg, but literally you say, I broke myself the leg. Probably it's always linked to the fact that you do something in your behalf or against you or against somebody else. That is the mental and the mental effectiveness of actions. And this has a lot of consequences in grammar, and well, in grammar as far as I know. In other things I don't know, but yeah. Okay. Sorry. So this is a case in which your a and u have different uses in the grammar, not only about space. So in the end, in my analysis, but it's my analysis, because remember that the language is not described yet, it's being described, and is not described by native speakers. So we are completely foreigners that want to grasp a language that we do not know and that we will never know well. So sometimes I have the impression that we linguists, when we study a language, we, just like we scratch the surface. And what we get is just the surface. And there is much more that we don't know, not know, because I will never have the insight in Gawada like I have in my own language. Okay, I am rambling. Yeah, so there are lots of possible correlations, yes. Certainly there are for A and U in Gawada.
Well, it looks like there aren't any, there are no further questions, and I'm sure Mauro would like to get on with his evening.
It's
So,
getting dark, but
yeah, yeah.
No, there is light somewhere. Wait a moment.
There you go.
There you go. Yes.
And so let's see, next week, what is the topic of your talk?
Next week, or again on Monday, again at 5 p.m. The topic is colors. That is another category that is possibly universal, that there are a few theories. Actually, in this case, they are more anthropological than linguistic theories. And that there is a lot of discussion if there is any validity to this theory or not. And probably in the end, I was thinking of discussing the whole topic of relativity and universality in language and culture. But maybe it's too big for me, but let's just talk about it and have some discussion of what we can develop. And for another topic, the third topic, I am still quite open to suggestions. So if the students want to suggest topics, otherwise I was thinking about borders and how language and communities behave in space, and the consequences of borders on language diversity and language endangerment. Okay. Great. So the next one is about colors.
Okay.
I promise that I will talk less.
Well, I don't know that's, I thought you did a great job today. So, and we look forward to having you again next Monday, and hopefully everyone else can join us again. So we'll sign off for now, and we'll see you next Monday virtually at 5 p.m.
Thanks, Mauro.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Gracias. And yeah, see you tomorrow. Next Monday.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye.
See you. Bye. 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 Good night.